Hey everybody, it's Dr. May. How's it going over there? Hope your day is going okay. So today in this video, we're going to do a quick overview of all the interpersonal effectiveness skills. So this kind of a video is appropriate if you've never done DBT before and you want to get a sense of what DBT has to offer for interpersonal skills. So it kind of gives you that broad overview so you could follow up with certain skills that seem most useful to you once you're finished. Or if you've been through this module before in DBT, it kind of is a great way to summarize everything and kind of help keep it fresh in your mind. All right, so let's get started. Where are we here? Aha, okay. All right, so here's our overview. So interpersonal effectiveness, what's this module about? It's about maintaining good interpersonal relationships. So it's about expressing our needs and asking what we want effectively. Well, actually, I think I have a slide about all this. Right, okay. So about getting what we want a little bit more effectively using assertiveness, about keeping good relationships, because of course we all need people in our life, right? We're not just living on an island. And finally, for keeping self-respect. So, being true to ourselves and recognizing our needs and our right to do what we need to do to be okay. All right, so we're going to break this down, talk about each one briefly. All right, so getting what you want skill is represented by the acronym Dear Man. All right, so this is a great skill if you have a slightly more lengthy request that you need to make. Maybe you need some explanation as part of it, or you need to make your case to kind of, give some evidence as to why you should get what you're requesting. Okay, so for example, asking for a raise, asking for more privileges at the hospital, maybe asking your parent for a favor, something to that effect, right? So let's say we're starting with the dear. So this is the part where you're starting to explain what you need to explain. So first you describe what the situation is as objectively as you can, trying to avoid judgments. And you express how you feel about it. You assert by actually asking the question in a very clear way. And then you reward the person by perhaps thanking them for listening to you, or maybe showing what's in it for them if they help you out, okay? Between the dear and the man is usually around when the person starts to respond. So they might just say, okay, right away, and you're finished. But sometimes, you have to negotiate a little bit, or you have to deal with their reaction, right? So let's say they kind of pull you off track and, they bring up old stuff or they change the topic. So you need to stay mindful and focus on your request. So if they get you off the topic, you got to bring it back to the topic. You might have to repeat the request using broken record if necessary, okay? It helps in this phase to also appear confident, be confident that it's okay to ask for what you're asking for, right? Don't let them, make you feel bad about it. And finally, negotiate, because maybe you can't get exactly what you want, but you can get part of what you want. Or maybe you can come up with a different solution by talking it through with the person. All right, so have a little flexibility in that phase. So that's the Dear Man skill. Okay, so then just a quick review of assertiveness, because it has to do with assertiveness. So when you make an assertive request, you're trying to regulate your emotions, trying to be calm, being direct about what you're asking, not just beating around the bush or hinting, and being respectful to the other person, and also preserving your self-respect. Okay, so keep in mind assertiveness if it's a very quick request, right? So you don't need Dear Man if you're saying, could you please pass the salt? Okay, that's like a one-line request, and that could be done in an assertive way, being calm, direct, and respectful, right? Again, if you need more of an explanation for something, Dear Man's a good way to go. All right, so we had another presentation about tips for assertive asking. All right, so sometimes people fluctuate, and if you're very in emotional mind, feeling kind of anxious or angry about something, you might get a little too intense. You might demand things, right? You might be a little rude about trying to get what you want. So sometimes in that case, you need to dial back the intensity, right? Be a little calmer. Other times you might have anxiety about asking and may not ask at all, or might ask in such a wishy-washy way that the person is more likely to say no to you. Okay, so in that case, you might have to dial up the intensity of your request and be a little bit more firm and clear. All right, so we talked about intensity. Preparation, so if you need to explain something in the process of making your request, or you want to prepare for what the person might say to you, or if they're going to deflect in some way, try to prepare in advance. Try to rehearse it if you need to. Write down some evidence of what you want to say if you need to. Build your case. Okay, so that could help the process. Timing's really important. Trying to pick a good time when you could talk to the person, when they could give you their full attention, when they're not busy, when they're in a good, calm, relaxed mood. All right, so that's always important and helpful. Picking the right person to ask. So, you want to pick somebody that could actually give you what you want, So if you, like I gave an example in the other video, if you ask your accountant for medical advice, you may not be able to get it because an accountant may not know anything about that, right? You got to ask the right person for the right kind of information. And finally, if you're a little hesitant about asking, you could certainly try to boost yourself up by using positive self-talk, which DBT likes to call cheerleading statements. So you could imagine your inner cheerleader saying, come on, you could do this, okay? Or other kinds of, cheerleading statements to overcome your anxieties. All right, so that was for that presentation. Next, the give skill. So this is all about keeping good relationships, right? So we want to maintain positive relationships with the people in our life, whether it's our family, our friends, coworkers, professionals, store clerks, everybody, right? It makes life much more smooth that way. Because if we have turmoil in our relationships, it can be very triggering for us. And our inner turmoil can make our relationships more problematic. So it's a two-way street. So how do we keep a good relationship? One, be gentle. So watch our nonverbals and the way we're coming across, right? So kind of make sure we're keeping a gentle voice tone. We're being kind and sensitive to the other person and the person's needs. We're acting interested. So we're listening to the person when they talk, showing an interest in what they have to say. Even if we're not 100% genuinely interested, because we want to keep a good relationship, it's important to act like we're interested, right? To at least try, okay? Because sometimes we're kind of boring too, and we would want the same respect from the other person, right? Okay, so then validate. So that's putting yourself in the person's shoes and trying to imagine life from their perspective. Try to imagine like why they do what they do, or what's the motive behind why they engage in a certain behavior, and then communicate that to the person. So it makes the person feel seen and heard. And that's really could go a long way in building a good relationship. And finally, sort of related to the be gentle, use an easy manner. So keeping things nice and fun and light in the relationship, laughing together, doing fun things together, okay? And not always taking things so seriously and too personally and stuff like that. All right, so that's a gist of keeping a good relationship. Next, they talk about the FAST skill, which is about keeping or building self-respect. All right, so the more self-respect we have and the more we bring that to relationships, chances are people will respond to that a certain way, right? And you'll attract a certain kind of person into your life. And hopefully, you'll be allowing people in that respect your self-respect. Okay, and if they don't, you got to start asking yourself, well, why do I keep that person around in my life? Do I feel like I deserve better treatment, or do I feel like I don't? And we have to really work on that, okay? But if you're motivated to try to build your self-respect, it's important to put some of these FAST skills into action. So first, being fair to yourself, which means, don't do more than your fair share in a relationship. It should be a two-way street, right? You shouldn't be doing all the work or all the favors, right? Sometimes you have to say no, remembering that if there's a problem, that it's never all your fault, right? There's two people involved, or maybe other circumstances involved. So it's not fair to take on all the burden. All right, so those are some examples of, how it operates would be fair. So remember, keep a balanced view of, all the things that are involved here. No apologies or no overly apologetic behavior means, say you're sorry when you actually did something wrong, but don't overuse I'm sorry for every little thing, right? You don't have to say I'm sorry if you're hungry. You don't have to say I'm sorry if you have to go to the bathroom. You don't have to say I'm sorry just for existing, all right? If you keep doing that, it's going to diminish your self-respect. So don't overly apologize. Be mindful of when you're doing that and try to say something else. You might actually mean something different, but you're so used to saying I'm sorry that you keep just saying it, all right? So just be careful there. Sticking to your values. So first you got to identify what some of your core wise mind values are, and then act with integrity by making choices based on those values, okay? So one of the important values you might have is your personal recovery, right? So let's say I'm recovering from self-injury or from addiction. And so every choice I make should be in line with my recovery. So it shouldn't be about bringing toxic people in my life that are triggering me. It shouldn't be about, using drugs or alcohol to self-medicate when I'm upset, right? When I should make choices that lead me in a recovery direction. Okay. And when I do that, I feel better about myself. I'm in line with what's important to me. And I'm not just going to throw it out the window just because I'm trying to win approval from somebody, for example. All right. So really important to identify and then stick to your values. And finally, being truthful. So this has a lot of dimensions, right? So first, we want to be honest with ourselves, right? We don't want to, lie to ourselves about who we are and what's going on with us. We want to see ourselves fully and clearly, acknowledge our good parts and our bad parts. And same thing with situations. We want to see it fully and clearly, acknowledging what's really going on. And we want to communicate honestly with other people. Because if we're known as a liar, people won't have much respect for us. And we're not going to have much respect for ourselves, right? Even when it's hard, if we're honest, that'll make us feel better. Well, it's always pays to be in line with the truth, even when it's a challenge, even if it means giving up something in order to be honest. Okay, so that's all I'll say about that for now. Okay, so next, so this is a little tied into self-respect too, because sometimes in order to respect your limits, let's say not taking on, too much work or too much responsibility or doing so much caretaking that you wear yourself out, you need to say no sometimes. Okay, so let's look at this a little dialectically. So let's say emotional mind, right? This emotional mind knows and wise mind knows. So let's say the emotional mind know version is when you feel so vulnerable or so fearful that you automatically say no way more than you need to, just because you feel threatened by taking on something else or by agreeing to something else. So if that's what's going on, you might need to pull back a little bit, re-examine the situation and think, all right, did I really have to say no? Could I be a little flexible? Could I maybe agree to that? And so there's a series of questions you could ask yourself in order to decide if no is appropriate or if a yes is appropriate. So then another kind of emotional mind we might experience is a fear of saying no. In certain circumstances, like we might be afraid of disappointing somebody or having the person angry at us if we don't do what they're asking us to do. So we might hesitate to say no and maybe just not say it. All right, so if that's the case, there's cheerleading statements to kind of encourage us inside, to get the courage to say no when it's actually necessary. Okay, so there's also, for both of those things, a little chart about the intensity of the no. So if you happen to be one of those, really intense, no, 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 automatic no people, you might need to lighten up on the intensity a little bit, all right? If you're someone who's fearful of saying no, you might have to increase the intensity a little bit. You might have to be a little more clear about your no, a little more direct about your no, not just kind of super subtle, hoping someone will just figure it out, which may or may not happen, depending on the person. Okay, and finally, we talked about some wise mind appropriate no's. So legitimate reasons for saying no, right? If someone's really being inappropriate with you or asking an unreasonable request, it's totally okay to say no, right? So we need to recognize what those situations are, how they make us feel, and then use our assertiveness skills to say no. So some sentence stems are provided to help us do that and know the words we could use in that situation. Okay, and finally, there's a skill that was added in the new manual that came out a few years ago about building and ending relationships. So this is a little tied into the give skill because give skill is about keeping a good relationship. But this is sort of like, well, how do we start over? Once I have the relationship, I could use give to keep it, but maybe I want to meet new people, or I just moved, or I started a new job or a new school, or I went to a new hospital and I want to meet new people. So what do I do? What are some skills I could apply there? So that's really the gist of this one, all right? So they talk about proximity. So being around the same kind of people a lot helps you build relationships and start friendships, or dating perhaps, right? That's what you're into. Similarity, finding people you have stuff in common with. I would say make sure it's positive things you have in common, because it's very easy for people to drag each other down, such as have contests about who has the worst self-injury and to bond over negative things. So watch that, okay? If you're in recovery and you're in DBT, you should hopefully pick people that, you have stuff in common with based on positive interests. Like join a yoga class, be with people that are trying to work on their own wellness, things like that, okay? It gives them tips for conversation skills, like, the kinds of things you could talk about, the way you could listen and respond to people more effectively, the way you show interest in people, so we go through that in this skill set. Expressing liking selectively. So, letting the person know, there's certain things you admire about them, or give them compliments where appropriate. And also, because mindfulness is everywhere, we talk about how we could observe, describe, and participate in a mindful way during interpersonal interactions, right? So we could tune into what we're feeling, the other person, what they're saying, be in the moment, do it one thing at a time, like really pay attention, right? And just, go with the flow in a non-judgmental way. And that helps a lot. So bringing mindfulness into interpersonal relationships is a great way to apply mindfulness. And, finally, there's a small section, although this, there's a lot that could be said about this, but in this particular section of the module, it's very brief. Just a reminder that issues do come up and it's important to work them through when they arise. And if a relationship really seems hopeless, or you can't work it through, or you're just too different, it's important to know that sometimes you just do have to end it, okay? Whether it's a one-person decision or a mutual decision, all right? And that's just part of life, and sometimes you just have to start over after that with somebody new. Okay, all right, so that's that. All right, so that was a pretty quick review, right? Interpersonal effectiveness isn't that long of a module. Emotion regulation is a lot longer. All right, so hope that helps, and I'll see you next time for more skills, okay? All right, bye guys.